Yeah.
This week on Ready Up, Ping Pong, Seattle. Hey guys, welcome to Ready Up.
Wow.
My name is Joshua Davis, aka Grouch. Today I'm joined by game designer Karl McLean.
Hello.
I also have game design lead Jonathan Sharp.
Hey guys, how you doing?
And today we're going to be tackling an interesting topic. It's going to be balance philosophy.
For ping pong?
Indeed.
Nope, ping pong will be later on. We'll also be talking about how great it is in Seattle and Bellevue.
All right.
And everything else that was in that sweet, intentionally corny intro video.
We hope you guys like that. A little something, something.
Yes. So anyways, like I said, I've got Chap here today. And Chap was one of the, I would say, main designers for most of the professions pre-launch.
Yep.
So he's got a bit of knowledge on where those professions
Team
came.
effort, though. I mean, gotta
Of course.
You know, it was Izzy, you know, myself. You had Colin throwing in some ideas. You had Peters obviously doing a lot of stuff. So big team effort. Carl helped a lot. You know, so we had a lot of people just talking about what should these professions do? How are they different? How should they play? So pass a lot of that on to you guys.
So I'm gonna
Take your piece of paper back. That's
Thank
fine.
you. I think what we hear a lot is like, our professions, you know, how do you approach changes? Is it just like, are we looking to make sure that everyone does the same amount of damage, that everyone does the same amount of healing? And I just want to talk about, like, is that the case? Like, at a high level, can you explain how balance is approached?
Sure. It would be easier if it was just the numbers of like how much damage versus how much healing, but it's actually a lot more complicated than that. It's also much more complicated when you get into trying to balance for PvE and world versus world and PvP all at the same time with the same set of tools which we give to each of the classes. So that's where it gets really interesting. So a lot of times when we're doing these things, we'll talk about, for instance, Class A might have more damage than Class B, but then you have the health differences, you might have the mobility differences, you might have one of them is better at range than melee. You have a lot of different factors that go into each of the classes. So it's not quite that simple, but there's a lot of factors. And over the course of today's talk, I think we'll be talking about a lot of those different factors and how they play into that balance. So.
Okay, so to lead in, I guess, with that discussion, one of the questions on the forums was, are balance changes proactive or like reactive? Like, are we going towards a goal, or are we kind of taking a look at the current meta in each one of the game types and trying to balance towards that? Like, can you tell me like where things are headed and how they get there?
Short answer, TLDR is both.
Okay.
You want to talk a little bit about that? I don't know.
Well, I mean, so in terms of proactive or like
Are we reactive?
reactive. It is both, and that we have certain ways we like to push the professions, and we're proactively making designs and saying that we're going to do this at this time. We're going to keep pushing the profession towards our overall goal. And then there are some reactive sort of balance changes that we do based on how things develop and like the way that players react to certain meta types.
And how you guys learn the game. So for instance, an example I like to always use in balance is StarCraft in the very early days. Terran wasn't as strong as it later became. But the community, once the community learned to play the Terran race better, they became much more efficient. So things that used to be really hard to have to move in and set up a lot of Vulture mines or have to set up a lot of siege tanks, build bunkers, put guys inside of them. We as a community in the first couple of years, we just didn't really know how to do that stuff fast enough. But then you saw the Korean players come along and they said, you know, we can really push this to another level through our execution, which meant that all of a sudden the balance changed. It's the same thing kind of with us. The Elementalist, I think, is a good example of this for us, where it's a lot of skill to play the Elementalist. And at first, a lot of people didn't really get it, but then after a while, you saw that Elementalist became one of the dominant classes in some of the game types, because people had just kind of figured it out, and once they had the execution that they needed, they could pull out that raw potential of the class. So we had to kind of tone it down a little bit because of that, and that's an example of having a goal for what we want the classes to be, combined with, well, we have to be reactionary to what the game has become. You know, you can have an idea in your head as designers of what you want something to be, but things are going to change. So you got to be ready to be humble and adjust your ideas.
So Karl mentioned, like, there's kind of an idea of where every profession should be, right? Like
Sure.
Some classes should be good at certain things, and some should not be good at other things, right?
Sure.
Yes.
And we'll kind of go. So I asked in the forum thread that I announced the show and asked for player feedback on where they felt that each profession should be.
Yep.
And we'll go through these here in a little bit, but I wanted to have Chap kind of touch on a sweet phrase he's coined.
Purity of purpose, that one?
No, not well. Actually,
Also
that
a
comes
good
up a
one?
lot. Let's talk about purity of purpose.
Okay, we'll do purity of purpose first. This is something we've had in design here at ArenaNet, phrase thrown around for since I got here with Eric and with James Finney, the older guys. Purity of purpose is the concept of You want to make it such that players understand something and they understand its role in the battlefield for whatever game you're talking about and how it works. If you don't want to have something that does too many things at once, sometimes players can be confused about how to use it. Where does it apply? But also, it's really cool to have. I have this ability to use certain things, like maybe A does something and B does something different. I kind of in my mind now have a sense of how to use these different tools differently. If everything does everything to equal levels, it's really confusing. You don't have that purity of purpose to know, oh, the game is telling me that I should be using A right now, or the game is telling me that I should be using B right now. So purity of purpose is the concept of you want to keep things streamlined in the sense that players understand how to use them, and also you don't want to give too many tools to the player with one toolbox. At any single time, or you kind of negate all the challenge and the back and forth and the counterplay of playing a game.
So this leads into holes and rolls.
Holes and rolls.
Holes and rolls.
Holes and rolls.
Not a donut.
Not a donut. It's kind of the same idea of we don't want every single class, and we get this I think right with balance and sometimes wrong with balance. You don't want any single class to be able to do everything better than everybody else, or you get what we also call the apex predator, which is the idea that you just have one thing that's just better at everything than everybody else. That's bad. That's bad for any game. So what we want to do is we want to put holes in the rolls. For instance, you might have a really strong damage spec. Well, does it also have a lot of sustain? Does it also have a lot of healing? Can it deal with wounds? Can it deal with conditions? Is it ranged? Is it melee? Does it have high amounts of escapability or mobility? If it's yes to all these things, which we've had some specs for short times that did some of those things to too great a degree, we had to kind of bring those things down a little bit. We had to shave them down a little bit because of that.
So with holes and rolls, it actually creates diversity because there's things you can't do. And like you mentioned, Apex Predator, if one profession was just great at everything, you would bring 5 of those, right?
Sure.
Yep.
So by creating holes and rolls, you have incentive to bring, A, B, C, D, right? You want to diversify your group.
Exactly, and it really helps too to let players who identify with their class to have, I might suck at A and B, but guess what? I'm really good at F, and I can really bring F to the party, and nobody else can do what I can do in that way or combine the different roles in the way that I do. So it might suck for you as a player if we say that, oh yeah, we don't want that class to have strong access to a lot of mobility or condition removal. But that's good for the game overall because it keeps all the classes moving into different roles, whether you're playing PvP, you're in a PvE dungeon, or you're playing, World over World, maybe you're in Zerg, maybe you're skirmishing. We want to have those different places where the different matchups change based off party composition. So by taking away things from some of the classes sometimes, it helps them to get stronger at other things, which then lets them to say, okay, hey, you guys need this, I can bring that to the party. Whereas if you have everybody doing everything and nobody has any roles, then it gets back to, okay, well then mathematically somebody's just better. And if mathematically they're just better at doing the damage, then that's just going to be the dominant tool to use for that problem set, if you will.
So on that note then, you mentioned having counterplay to things. One of the questions that was often repeated on the forums was, what is our stance on hard counters?
Sure.
I think Carl was talking about this earlier.
Okay.
Yes. I'm trying to think of what I was talking about earlier in the best way to phrase it.
Okay.
There are certain things that people have called hard counters. For example, Berserker Stance or the revealed buff and stuff like that. Some of these hard counters are deliberately put there to, I would say, provide moments of reaction for the players.
Sure.
Where you have to say that, oh, my play style is going to have to change for a brief period of time, and then I'm going to resume doing what I was doing.
And usually if we have a hard counter, I think a lot of times what we try to do is keep the window short. For instance, if you have a skill that stops all projectiles, it's not going to last a super long time, or any class that wants to use projectiles all of a sudden can't do anything, which is not fun for them. So we try to keep those two. Berserker Stance is a good example of the warriors. If you don't know, Berserker Stance is one of the stances for the warrior that says that the duration of incoming conditions is greatly reduced to the point of they just have this window where they can really stand up to conditions, but it's just that window. So what you have to do is make sure that those hard counters don't last for too long, or it takes away a lot of the play. A lot of times what you want to do is a soft counter instead, which is just I'm resilient to those things a little bit, but they still have effect, and that way both players still get to play. Okay. If you look at Endure Pain as another example for the warrior, that if that thing lasted for 2 minutes,
that's a hard counter.
They could push the button and say, now no physical damage will harm me, and there's no play on the other side of that. So.
On the other side, they're also with Endure Pain, you're also vulnerable to conditions at that time as well. So it's only it's more of a soft counter in a sense.
Sure.
Hard counters is not something we're aiming for, but soft counters are. And to kind of touch on what you said with Berserker Stance, a lot of people call that a hard counter, but it really just it forces you to change the way you're playing at that immediate moment. For like, so I'm going to use a very PvP example because that's my forte, right? So if I'm approaching a warrior on a point and I'm playing like Condition Engineer and I see him on point and he pops a Berserker Stance, I know that's 10 seconds that I'm gonna back off, because ultimately if I have more mobility than he does, I can move off, and that's a wasted cooldown for him. When I come back in, he loses all that defense.
Yep. And it's at a hard counter for that short time, but yeah, because of that gives you the ability to you kind of bait. You know, you kind of want to bait out that I want to see that stance come out. Let me throw just enough condies to pressure it. Okay, he's thrown. Okay, let me back off, save my cooldowns, get ready, move around, kind of play footsie with him. Now go back in when it's finished. So there's that play back and forth.
I can't count the amount of times I walk up to a point, throw one grenade, see Berserker Stance, and I'm like, okay, I'll be right back.
Sure.
Give me 10 seconds.
Yeah. All right. So another question I wanted to cover real quick here.
Okay.
We've just got a couple here that I pulled out of the forums. And,
No, that's
move
great.
on to the professions. So is there any relation between a profession's base health / armor weight and their DPS potential?
Yeah.
Yes.
Do you want to just Thief is kind of near and dear to your heart, but we can talk about Thief real quick.
Thief has a very large utility set in terms of like mobility. They have extreme mobility, and their health kind of reflects that their play style, and that they can move in and move out without too much effort, and that is their hit and run is more of their play style than stand and tank. And that's one of the reasons why their health pool reflects that.
Which plays into kind of their style, as opposed to some of the other classes that have more of a sustained condition pressure, a sustained DPS. The Thief, especially in melee, this is important, is really good at just jumping in really quickly, unloading a lot of damage. But because of their low health and only the medium armor, they have to be careful. They can't stay in there for too long. They can't sustain themselves for too long, especially if a lot of AoE and conditions are in, like if it's a really rough dungeon, or if it's a World v. World Zerg, you got to be careful while you're in there as the Thief. Because of your low health, that plays into I have a lot of damage, but the flip side of that would be somebody like perhaps the Guardian, who is pretty buff, pretty tanky in a lot of situations. The Necro, pretty buff, pretty tanky. They don't have nearly as much spike potential outside of very, very small sets. But because of that allows them to kind of do a little bit more sustained stuff. So their numbers reflect more of a sustained play style because of that. You look at the Warrior as well. They can put out some DPS really, really quickly. A lot of their stuff is just more of a steady pressure until they hit you with a burst skill, because they do have the ability to sustain into a fight.
Yeah, and similarly, like with the Guardians, they have a low health pool, but they have an extreme amount of like support and sustainment in a fight. So they would be really crazy if they had a larger health pool than they did right now. I think.
So I got one more main question here.
That's fine.
The last one I'll go over is how is balance approached? In we have 3 game modes, right? We have World for World, PvP, and PvE. When we're looking at a change, do we evaluate that change versus other game modes? Like, how do we approach that?
Yes, very much so. If it's a proposal to an existing change, or sorry, an existing skill, it might be the case that we say, okay, that's a good proposal. I like it for PvE and for World versus World, but it's not a strong proposal for PvP. Vice versa, it could be something that, hey, that's a great idea for World versus World, doesn't work so well in PvE encounters. So we have a lot of things that we'll throw out an idea, be it for like a new heal, a new trait, new skills, or reworking existing skills, and the conversation almost inevitably comes back to, does this work in all 3? Do we feel like it's a strong change that we think that players of all classes and all game types will like? We have some things that I think are a little bit too focused on certain areas of the game. You'll see balance a lot of times we're trying to shift things such that the changes affect positively more players in more aspects of the game, because we want to make sure that players are happy in PvE and PvP and World versus World.
And if there's a change that says like we need to change this for PvP, but it's perfectly fine everywhere else in the game, we're willing to split skills and change things so that they have slight differences.
So the example that was brought up prior to this was Pistol Whip. So Pistol Whip was something you could use very, very often, right? And so what we did is we increased the initiative cost in PvP only, because it was felt that Pistol Whip is great for PvE. It does a lot of cleave damage, and it was great for that game mode. But we only want to change it in one area.
Yeah, and similarly, also like with the Necromancer's bleed stacks, we have like their grasping hands. That's what it's called. that does 3 stacks of bleeding, and same with Mark of Blood that'll do 3 stacks of bleeding in like PvE and World vs. World. But then when you get over to PvP, it's like the stats are a lot more limited, and those skills were giving a little bit too much condition damage output.
Sure.
And so we've split those as well.
All right. One last point on that is how important is maintaining the functionality of a skill between game modes. So say we do a split of a skill. Would we ever change maybe the skill does it creates. I don't know. It creates a balloon in PvE.
I was about to segue into that. Yeah, no, it's a great point. So dovetailing off of what he's saying, I think you're raising a great point, Josh, which is that we don't want to change things so drastically that you kind of don't recognize your class when you get into World versus World if you were just playing normal PvE, or you get into PvP and all of a sudden the durations and the effects of all of your skills feel different. Because we want you to be used to, if I'm playing a Guardian, I want to know that this is what my Guardian does. These are the roles that I'm strong at filling, be it PvE or War versus World or PvP. We want it to be the case that the splits aren't too drastic, that we just kind of throw off players' ability to recognize their own role and how they should be playing. We don't want to make it too drastic for players.
Okay.
So we have to kind of balance those two factors at once.
All right, you guys want to jump into the professions?
Yeah, no, you guys had a lot of great feedback, so we could just kind of jump into the stuff that you guys put on the forum thread that Josh put up.
Yeah, so the main goal with the feedback from the forum thread was to find out where you guys felt that the professions, were the places they should be. What are the things that they should be good at, and what are the things that they are not so good at? And maybe a couple of things were what's your kryptonite, what's really rough for you.
Right.
Kind of mixed feedback. A lot of people saying this is the current state of the game, this is what we're good at, this is what we're bad at. I really wanted to kind of look forward and go for ideally, where would you want things to be? And so I've kind of got a mixture of the feedback here. I just want to go through it real quick.
That's great.
Here.
We've been reading through the entire thread. This is probably not going to reflect everyone's opinions.
Yeah. We try to get as many as we could, though.
I pulled bullet points out. There was a lot of feedback. There was 6 pages of feedback, something like that, within a day. I think I put it up Wednesday night.
Yep.
So that's pretty impressive.
Yeah.
So again, thanks for participating, rather.
And thanks for keeping your feedback pretty concise and kind of filling out the template that we set out there. It's pretty easy to read, and we're able to be oh, this is exactly
bullet points.
I understand this.
Bullet points are your friend as well as ours.
Yes. So we'll go through the strengths of the Elementalist, and this is again not representative of everyone's feedback, but this is again the feedback I found from the thread, and we'll kind of compare that to where we feel things should be kind of in the end game situation.
Sure.
Right? So for Elementalist, the big one was. Oh, don't worry.
Huh? We're cheating.
Don't read my answers, guys.
Okay, sorry. Go ahead. I'll be surprised when you say it.
So flexibility, kind of jack of all trades, being able to fill multiple roles and have a large skill set. No matter what you're wielding, you have 20 weapon skills. Right?
Yeah. Yes.
So flexibility is a big one. High AoE potential. They felt that the Elementalist should have probably the most AoE damage, or at least a competitor for the top tier AoE damage. And then another big thing with the Elementalist that a lot of people mentioned, and also with Engineer, is that it has a high skill floor. So it's very hard for a new player to jump onto Elementalist and start performing right out of the gate.
Yep.
But there's also a high skill ceiling, meaning you start. It might be a little rough, but the payoff for it is very, very high. And players seem to like that.
Yep.
People like to be recognized for very high skill professions. Again, high reward.
So do you want to break each of those down individually, or how would you like to do this?
I think, it's up for, I guess we could talk about it. I was just kind of list them off and then see where we felt that they aligned. Maybe we can kind of compare notes.
Sounds good.
All right, so do you want to talk about strengths and elements, or do you want to go to the weaknesses first?
Why don't we cover...
Let's go weaknesses first.
Go for it, yeah.
Okay, let's do it. All right, so big one was recovering from burst damage. They right now, at least, there doesn't seem to be a lot of defensive skills, so they feel like the Elemental should be able to put out a lot of damage, but because of their relatively low HP pool, they do have the smallest one, and just passive defenses, they weren't great against it. And they feel like that's probably a good place for it, within reason.
Sure.
And again, coming in back to the same thing, I put down low passive defense was another one. Just being able to not tank all that damage, but they do have high sustain, so that's kind of like their
the weakness in them is that they have troubles with heavy spike damage and taking a lot of damage at once. But they have things like water attunement or a few cantrips or such things so that they can actually go into water attunement and fill themselves back up fairly quickly, a lot quicker than most professions can.
So I didn't have this listed down, but another one of them was flexibility again. So it was master of all trades, or jack of all trades rather.
Sure.
They felt that Elementalist, you have a great skill set, right? But every skill seems to be, I wouldn't say weaker, but tuned to accommodate having 20 skills, right?
Yeah.
And so they felt like while Elementalist versatility is their strength, it's also their weakness in some points.
That is true. They do tend to have higher cooldowns on their weapon skills than most other weapon skills. Because of the extreme utility that they have.
You'll also notice that a lot, and this is all by design. So these are great holds in the rolls, as we talked about earlier. I wanted to touch on the last point real quick before we hit some of the other things. But a lot of their skills are very focused in what they do, very purity of purpose of this skill just does a chill. The skill is just a daze. The skill is just DPS. Because you have 20 skills to work with. That's kind of the idea that you have to mix and match. But as we said, that skill floor, once you get past that skill floor, once you figure out how to weave all these things together, that's when you start to get really strong as an Elementalist. So that's one of those places where kind of the concepts we've been talking about, you can kind of see it directly in the Elementalist and the strengths and the weaknesses. That those are the things we want you to feel as an LE.
All right, you guys want to go over the, I would say the official?
Yeah, sure.
The official design?
So we have some ideas too that we just wanted to pass on to you guys, kind of where the LE's at, where the LE has been before, and where the LE's kind of going in the future. Some of these things are very much in line with what you guys have said in your strengths and weaknesses, so we just kind of wanted to talk about some of those with you guys. So.
All right. So which one are we starting with then?
So versatility is also something that's very high on our list for the LE. We want to make sure that we maintain that. We also want to make sure that the defense versus sustained DPS is good.
Yes. And also that they are very supportive in pretty much in most roles that they assume they'll have some sort of support aspect to them.
You'll see this too, like in some of the newer Grandmaster traits we just put in, trying to get that sense of if you want to really be able to heal people, you can heal other people. You can't sustain yourself with that, but you can really try to keep other people sustained as well. And that still goes back to that idea of they can't do stuff of let me just stop all spikes, let me just shuttle that down. But they can kind of slowly bring you back up if there's too much pressure. But we need to be careful that they don't have that as well as a lot of anti-spike potential, because then if you put those two together, you get something that you kind of can't break. You want to have a hole in one of those so that as the opponent, you know that, okay, he can sustain himself really well, but once I blow through a lot of his self-sustaining cooldowns for direct spike damage, I can kind of eat through that and get at the LE, push them away if we're playing skirmish fights, maybe in World versus World, or if you're playing like a dungeon or something like that they can't sit there and just sustain forever against all types of combat. So we got to be careful not to give them too much there, or they can just overshadow that position. So.
Alrighty, and as for weaknesses, what low base health is one of their weaknesses that is there on intentionally, so that we can give them more support areas. Their defense against spike damage is also kind of an intended like area where we want to make sure that they have trying to help me out here. So that we want to keep them, make it so they sustain to keep themselves higher and regenerate, but make sure that they have to be wary of situations where they're going to take spike damage.
So it's a lot of active defense, would you say?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Also the escapability. There was a time I think in the history of the LE, their evolution, where they had too much escapability. What I mean by escapability is if you are in a really bad dungeon fight that's just not going well, you're in a World versus World fight that's not going well, or you're playing a cap point and it's just not going well, they had a lot of ability to just get completely out, which if you think about it is also a way to say I can't be spiked for that time too, which is kind of overshadowing one of their weaknesses. And a lot of players rightly so were like, hey, I feel like these LEs are kind of like, I do a lot of this work, I try to get them down, and they just leave the fight. I just feel like, and then they go heal up and come right back, and I feel like it's not really fair to me as the other player. So we listen to you guys on that one. We want to make sure that we don't repeat that same error and give them too much anti-spike or escapability, because they have so much versatility and so much sustain. So we got to be careful with that. We got to make sure that that's balanced for you guys, so that it's fun to play and it's fun to play against. So
yeah, the last weakness is their inability to deal with boons, enemies with boons.
Yep.
Particularly.
And this is obviously a bigger deal in PvP and in World vs. World. A lot of the PvE content that we have coming, though, is going to have a lot more of that feeling of you. That's going to become a pretty decent weakness. It's going to be something that you really need to think about. And again, we want to have those holes in the roles, as we said, such that the LE might have. And again, we want to have some really strong AOE for the LE, especially on stuff like staff, that they can really make it rain. Literally, that was not meant to be. That was not meant to be a joke.
Rain?
Sorry. Some healing rain, or rain with fire if you want to. That's probably better for them. But we have to be really careful that they can't also eat through the things that would stop that. So the protection. Maybe if there's the Aegis out there, if there's region, if there's retaliation, if they can also remove all that as well as keep throwing stuff out, again, that's just a little bit too strong. But then you get some other people who maybe don't have quite the AoE from range, maybe an engineer with some specs, but they are able to actually start to burn away some of those boons if they want to. Or the Necromancer, who we know is very good at getting rid of boons. Or the Mesmer, who can also get rid of boons.
So to touch on that point, so Elementalist has a hard time dealing with boons, as you said.
Sure.
But they're also very reliant on boons, right? They're a big boon provider to allies, similar to the Guardian. So it's interesting how they're really strong at providing boons, but they have a hard time dealing with them.
Yep.
So I'm going to draw that.
And that's a great point, because what you can have is you can have a tool set, just the concept of the boon or the concept of the condition, and then you can say, okay, I'm really good at using this, but I'm not very good at fighting it, which again gives us another place where we can differentiate all the classes. So keep that in mind as you're playing your class. Think about, if I could do everything, do I need to be able to deal with my opponent's boons, be it a big dungeon boss, be it some guardian that I'm fighting in PvP, and do I also need to be able to sustain myself through boons as well? Like, do I need both of those for every single side? Should I be able to actually put out spike damage and sustain myself against spike damage? Just think about both sides of the coin when you're playing other classes.
All right.
So,
Engineer?
Man, it's rocking.
Okay.
Yeah.
I mean,
Is that pretty much it?
Yeah. That's
okay. All right.
pretty
Let's
much
move
what
on.
I got.
Alrighty.
In the interest of time.
In the interest of time.
Yes.
It's
Yeah,
true.
All right. So Engineer. My favorite.
Your favorite. This is your baby.
I'm not on the balance team. Don't worry.
Yo, baby. Yo, baby.
Crouch just wants passive slick shoes, so we're just wherever he runs.
Yes.
Yes, everywhere, at all times.
Coming soon. Just kidding. So again, with the as with the Elementalist, Engineer has great flexibility. They have, I guess, I would say master or jack of all trades again. There's a lot of different things you can do. You can be support, you can be a bunker, you can do damage, you can do condition damage, power damage, a lot of kits.
Yes.
Still a lot of skills as well.
A lot of turrets.
A lot of turrets.
A lot of skill to the class as well, as far as the skill ceiling we talked. It's one of the more intricate classes to wrap your head around how it all kind of works together.
Right. So I actually have the high skill floor listed here again. High reward. Again, it's very dependent on what build you run.
Sure.
Some of the builds are easier, but there's a high potential in certain builds.
Sure.
And also strong strength, or a strong strength.
Strong strength. Okay.
A strength with the Engineer is CC that was listed.
Yes.
This is something we see. It's pretty prevalent, and they do have a lot of tools that can do that. So that was listed as a strength in a lot of posts.
Sure.
I figured I'd mention it, but that was kind of the main thing that was listed here for those guys on the strength side.
Okay.
On the weakness side, again, was the flexibility.
Because you can do everything, you're not as strong at any one thing. That concept?
Yes.
Okay.
So some of the skills players are expressing are very strong, and it does kind of limit you into those skill sets, I guess.
Yeah.
So while they're flexible, they do feel like they're kind of pigeonholed into a certain couple of builds, or maybe the build diversity is there, but the actual utilities that you use is not.
Sure.
So it's something that's mentioned.
Are you talking about grenades?
I'm talking about a variety of skills.
Sure.
Don't touch them. Anyways, condition removal was mentioned as as kind of a staple for the Engineer's weakness. There's not a lot of condition removal on skills.
Yep.
And then the third weakness listed was hobo sacks. Not really. Okay. I guess I can't hear everyone.
Yeah.
Anyways.
They're chuckling, I'm sure. Or they're like,
I'm sure they are. They're just in stitches.
yeah. Yes.
So, anyways.
So we want to walk through these?
Yeah, I mean, how does this align with where we think that Engineer should be?
It's pretty close. You want to walk through those, Karl, and then we'll kind of juxtapose the two?
Going through the weaknesses, one of the top one is actually condition overload is something that the Engineer generally seems to have an issue with, and this is partially. That's covering the topic there. It is by design that they don't have as many condition removals, or they have to seek them out they have to make a choice between utilities and in terms of using condition removals. I would say that maybe maybe they don't have enough just yet, because we enter the situation where there are certain things that can hard counter them. But
so that's pretty true.
But it is an intended that is a weakness of the class, and that is the hole in the jack of all trades for the Engineer. Limited spike potential is one that we have.
Can I touch on something real quick?
Yeah,
Just on that point.
Yeah.
So while engineer and any other class might have a weakness to conditions,
Yes.
the extent of that weakness is not always
Yes.
what you might perceive it to be. So, like, if engineer, we feel the condition, the susceptibility to conditions is too much right now or too great, that can always be changed.
Yes.
It can be, and again, we don't want to make it such that its conditions are a complete hard counter. It doesn't mean that, like, if an engineer sees any class that puts out, any conditions, I just can't play. We don't want it to be that, that case. But you should have to work a little bit harder because you have other ways to, like Elixir S is a great, like, I'm just, this fight's not working out. I just need a break. Let me get a few minutes to just chill. Like, you have a way to just say, okay, I'm not going to get spiked for a while. I'm not going to take direct damage. Conditions are still an issue there, but it says, like, I can really deal with that type of damage. But if we give you the ability to deal with both for sustained periods of time, you get to just where, like, you can't really break it as the other player.
Yeah, I just wanted to clarify that, like, not all of these changes are necessarily, or all of these descriptors are necessarily black and white.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Like, it's not always, if you see one condition, like, you got one bleed on you, you got to peace out. Like, it's just that there is a level somewhere in between of, completely hard countered, which is something that we mentioned before, is not necessarily what we want, and then being completely, just really great at it.
Yes.
So there's a level in between.
And depending on the content type, too, like, let's go back to one of the strengths that we listed, which was the CC, which they do have a lot of CC or crowd control. They have both soft and hard versions of this. So if I say soft, I mean something like a daze, maybe a blind, maybe I'm crippling my target, and it can't get to me to do damage right away. Those would be some soft ones. I've also got some hard ones if I'm playing an engineer. I can actually do some really nice stuns. I can do some
nice,
blowouts.
Some blowouts there.
Knocking you back. I can keep you off of me. Those are things that are really, really strong. So the idea, too, is that if the engineer is keeping kind of control of you, you can't put as many, his weaknesses, those conditions, you can't put as many back onto the engineer, which means that now that engineer is able to mitigate actively those conditions that might be coming in, is kind of the thought process there. The problem that they get into is when they're fighting multiple opponents and then somebody gets to drop on them and they can't use those CCs to keep that person off of them, right? I'm doing my jiu-jitsu. Sorry about that.
Channeling your inner John Peters right now.
So yeah, you don't really have that ability to actually, like, deal with multiple opponents in that way. So then again, it goes back to, okay, let me Elixir S, or let me use those let me use my block and my shield if I need to. Let me just try to get some more distance. Let me get a couple dodges. Maybe I got some vigor up. Let me get some more space. Let me reset and go again, so I can try to, get control of the fight. Yeah. So yeah, I think that your guys' thoughts on where the class is are pretty similar to ours. One of the places we wanted to talk about is in the future, just looking at, the conditions. Do they have enough ability to deal with those? Is it too much? Is it too little? So we'll be watching that. Also, their spike potential. You want to make sure that's not too high. There was a time when, if you guys will recall, that you could kind of do some really silly things.
100 nades?
Yeah, it was just blowing out PvE content. It was blowing out any fight in PvP or World versus World was just way too much. So we had to bring that down. We want them to kind of sustain themselves, and we don't want them to just jump in your face and just spike you the way a thief would. So
yeah, they're meant to, like, more whittle down your opponents rather than
sure
deliver massive spikes of damage all at a time. Strengths.
Sure.
What you got?
No, we agree. No,
Okay.
They are strong.
Yes, condition damage, stability fights, and the versatility through utility skills.
I'm sorry, what was the second point?
The sustainability in fights.
Sustainability, gotcha.
And that is like your regeneration and generally keeping yourself up a little bit better. And the versatility through utility skills, whereas like the Elementalist has their versatility through their weapon skills is often where they get that. The engineer has a lot of options,
right,
in terms of their kits or gadgets or tools or
tool belts and stuff. Yep.
Yeah. So, well, do we want to?
Yep.
You wanted to...
Just real quick, so and notice both of these classes, they both, we want to make sure that they both have the ability to apply the AoE damage that they might need to get in, for instance, like in a PvE party. But notice that the way that they do that's very different. Notice that the engineer is probably going to be a lot of grenades. It's going to be a combination or a hybrid of physical damage and conditional damage. When you look at the Ellie, really the only strong damaging condition that we've given them is that burning. And that's because we want to make sure that their damage comes to more of that straight up DPS or damage per second in AoE. But we don't want them to have also as well a lot of sustained burn. Because again, they would just overshadow so you kind of have two different regions you want to bring an engineer versus an Ellie, because they kind of bring different things to the party. So that's very much what we wanted to do.
So, as an aside,
sure.
Real quick, so some professions are admittedly not as they're not as good at applying conditions as other ones.
Sure,
So
sure.
for an example, might be Elementalist.
Sure.
Or Guardian.
Or Guardian, yep.
And they're very specific conditions that they can use, right?
Mm-hmm.
So when you guys are going through like when you guys are actually doing balance passes and looking at each one of these, the roles of each one of these fills, are you looking and saying, like, we don't think this class should do conditions, it should do power more?
Sure.
Like, how does that factor in, like, conditions versus just straight up power damage?
It's actually a number of things. It's also just the theme of the class.
Yes.
You look at the Ellie, I think that bleed through earth makes a lot of sense. Fire, getting burning, makes a lot of sense. Poison doesn't really fit their style of I'm going to kind of, attrition my target and take away the healing of my target.
Yeah.
That's not really their
the
style.
Elementalist is more, they cleanse the conditions rather than, generally speaking, rather than like applying like things like poison to the enemies. So, yeah, and that was kind of one of the things that comes up a lot. So Elementalists are very much themed, their conditions are themed to their attunements. And likewise, Guardians are themed to burning because they have
Holy
they're
fire.
vengeful.
Holy,
they're
yeah, vengeful, smiteful fire, yeah.
Yeah.
So there's...
We'll talk about a little bit more about the Guardians in a little bit.
But yeah, the quick answer is it's a factor of toolbox wise, just gameplay wise, what should they have? But there's also an element of just the theme of the class and where should the class feel when it's playing.
Okay.
So yeah.
So was there some weaknesses for engineer that we wanted to go over real quick?
Engineers don't have any weaknesses.
Okay, all right. So Guardian. Now, what did you?
No, we got most of those right.
We covered a few of them. The condition overload is something they have trouble with. Limited spike potential outside of a very few builds. there are a couple of there that are pretty strong, but they're not as viable. And then we have listed is their difficulty disengaging.
And this would be juxtaposed very strongly with the thief, for instance, or maybe a Mesmer, who can just say, "I'm going to drop this fight." Like they have the Elixir S as a great example, but they don't have a lot of tools like that.
So they have some means to disengage, but it's going to be a lot harder to disengage against something like a thief or.
We should talk about opportunity cost.
Okay,
let's talk about opportunity cost real quick. All right, so we've talked about some things. Purity of purpose. We talked about having holes in the different roles that people can fill. Let's also talk about purity of purpose. I'm sorry. I just
so often.
I just wanted to reuse it again. All right, so let's talk about opportunity cost. So, for instance, if I do want to use my Elixir S if I'm an engineer, or I do want to use my slick shoes, or I do want to use my rocket boots, I'm not bringing other stuff. I'm not bringing an Elixir R. I'm not bringing a bomb kit. I'm not bringing grenades. I'm not bringing these other tools. So there's also that thing of while you are versatile, we want to make sure that also there's that question of, do I want my build to be more sustainable right now, or do I need some more of that AoE? Do I want some more survivability, or do I want to have mobility to get in and out? You have to be kind of careful with those types of things because, again, if we give a single utility too much utility, a utility skill, it overshadows everything else in the bar. And again, it kind of pigeonholes classes into stuff. So that's why sometimes we have to be really careful to make sure that we maintain purity of purpose for utility skills such that we don't just say, this thing is just so good, everybody should always bring it at all times. So that's why we try to be really careful with giving too many tools on one single slot, which goes back again to the opportunity cost for the Ellie. If they want to be a staff Ellie, they probably don't have a lot of in melee strong stuff that they would get out of maybe, for instance, a dagger. So there's that back and forth opportunity cost of if you bring one, you can't bring the other, and what does that mean for how you play and how you build? So you need to also maintain the opportunity cost for a lot of the classes. Sorry.
All right. Good. Ready to move on?
Let's move it on.
Let's do it.
Guardian?
Let's do it.
All right. So Guardian, strength.
Go for it.
Pretty much the main one listed in all the feedback was Guardian is very good at providing boons to their allies, and they're also very good at providing sustain. Just a general group support.
Yep.
And that is the main staple of the Guardian.
It is, yep. And because, and again, kind of holes in roles, because they are so strong at that, I think that they're one of the, maybe the Ellie can compete as far as just raw sustainability, boon application, regeneration, healing. You'll notice that the Guardian is a little bit weaker when it comes to stuff like the conditions that they can apply, the ability to really deal with boons, the ability to put out a lot of sustained, damage, especially at range. If they do have damage, it's usually in melee or it's through a combination of different class mechanics that they're using. It's not just raw DPS usually that they are usually bringing to a fight. So.
Right. And a combination of the boons and the sustain not only to allies but to yourself as well also lends them to be very very tanky.
Yes.
That's another thing is that they kind of excel at being like the the meat shield of groups.
Yep.
Yes, and they having a low health pool, they do pretty well at doing this. Being that they have such high sustain through like Brune application, things like altruistic healing,
Condition removal as well.
condition removal is very strong. We like them as their frontline advancers and support. So like they go in with the front with everyone else in the front line. They're first in and last to leave sort of style of play.
And you notice juxtaposing really quickly then with like the warrior, for instance. The warrior has similar levels of sustain, but it's kind of a selfish sustain. Whereas the guardian says, not only am I going to be in your face, but the rest of my party is also going to be in your face because I'm going to keep everybody else rocking as well. So there's a slight difference in kind of how those two dudes work right now.
So to cover the weaknesses,
Or ladies. I said dudes, so dudettes.
Okay. All right.
Sorry.
Caught me off guard. I was like, tune back in.
Curveball.
All right. So some of the weaknesses.
Sure.
Reliant on boons for damage, damage reduction, and survivability.
Sure.
This also goes to weak to attrition. A lot of the damage mitigation on a Guardian seems very cooldown based, so the longer that you stretch into a fight, the weaker and weaker that you get. This is especially true versus like in Overworld versus like a Necromancer. Like they'll whittle you down over time. Same with an Engineer even. The longer the fight goes on,
They're most. I want to say that their strongest predators are ones that can deal with their boons. As soon as you start removing some of the Guardian's boons, they're going to start suffering more.
Necromancer, Thief.
Mesmer can also do it as well.
Yep. All right, low mobility.
Yep. Again, because they can so easily sustain themselves or their allies. We don't want them to also be super mobile at the same time, because then you just have this thing that just moves around the field too much.
You mentioned this with the Elementalist, using Red Lightning, disengaging, getting the healing off, the sustain, and then coming back into the fight, brand new.
Yeah.
We don't mind them moving to enemies or two different allies, like Merciful Intervention, that kind of thing.
Sure.
But actually leaving the fight is something that they are going to have problems doing.
And remember earlier we talked about, I think it was conditions or boons. Imagine yourself having both sides of that. Imagine I can really deal with people putting conditions on me, and I can also really do a good job of putting out conditions. Same thing with mobility. Mobility is another tool that we use so that you have both sides of mobility. For instance, a class may be able to, in this example, the Guardian, close into a fight and go help some allies really quickly, but they can't get out. And then other classes are good at getting out, but maybe they can't go in. And then you have people like the Thief, the Mesmer, who kind of have a little bit of both if they need it. They can kind of use either Portal for the Mesmer, they can just drop and just stealth if they need to, and the Thief can go in and out with a lot of their skills. So that's a tool set. Just being able to go into a fight and out of a fight is very versatile. So we have to kind of balance that as well.
And a lot of stuff makes sense thematically, I guess. Like you mentioned the Guardian goes in, he leads the charge, he's got a shield going, he goes in there and he wants to stay in that fight until you win or you lose. The Thief is much more like, going in, doing some damage, getting out.
This isn't going well, guys. Good luck. I'm out. Good luck, you guys.
I'll be back later.
See you back at base.
It makes sense that some of these would, perform differently.
Yep.
All right, so low ranged damage.
Sure. Yeah.
Yes. Being as they are the frontline offenders.
Sure.
Advance. They have much less utility at range.
They do have strong AoE though. Like a lot of the stuff that they can do through symbols, through the greatsword, through the staff. They have a lot of ways to do some AoE.
So the Elementalist can do some like support at range. They can be like, here's my healing fields. Here's some heals around here. I'm going to toss a water ball in your general direction. But the Guardian is more of, we wanted to be able to support and deal, like, he has a lot of support of it available to him, and we'd rather he did not do that from the back lines.
Sure.
We wanted him to be like the front line side of, like, when you're sieging a wall, he's going to be up beating on the door and helping everybody else.
Sure.
Healing them, giving them boons, that kind of stuff.
No, I thought that you guys had a really good sense of where the Guardian was at. I think you guys kind of understand why. We get made fun of sometimes because we say we think that they're in a good place, but they're kind of doing the role that they were designed to do. Yeah.
It's a drinking game.
I think that you guys kind of have a strong sense of what we think the Guardian should be. And it's one of the classes that's used in a lot of different areas of the game because of that they really have a strong set of skills to bring to any party. So, I keep going, or
yeah, all right,
who's next?
Mr. Mesmer.
Mr. Mesmer.
Mr. Mesmer. So, Master Misdirection?
Yes.
Master of,
I'd say only Thief comes close to rivaling that ability to just kind of be chaotic. I'm here, I'm not there, what's going on?
Let's go through the community stuff.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
So we've got misdirection.
Oh, did they align? Did they align so perfectly well?
Let me tell you, the Guardian one was actually pretty good.
Yeah, you guys were really close on that one.
Spot on.
CC is also mentioned for the Mesmer.
Yeah, so interrupts, lots of dazes, lots
A
of...
lot of crowd control.
Yep.
Yep.
And then,
Utility.
yes,
Yeah.
scoop utility. So, Veil, other, like, feedback.
Very good.
Lots of, I mean, a lot of Mesmers feel pigeonholed just because these are so
They're so strong. Yes,
Yeah.
yes.
So that was mentioned as a lot of the strengths, and I think that's pretty decent for Mesmer.
Yeah, and that's one of the things, if you look back at the history and the evolution of the Mesmer, all the way back to Guild Wars 1, they were very much that person that you brought to the party for that we need utility. We need to, keep somebody up really quickly. We need to get rid of boons or enchantments on a target. They were the person that you brought to kind of deal with those types of things. So,
All right, so weaknesses.
weaknesses,
Conditions,
conditions.
yes.
Similar to the engineer, similar to the thief. You'll notice that there's kind of if you have a lot of utility, you have a lot of offense, you have the ability to kill things. We can also give you a lot of ability to also deal with one of the things that lingers around if you're in stealth, which is those conditions. Which is why you'll notice that both the thief and the Mesmer sometimes on some specs can kind of have a harder time with conditions. They have to be careful with those.
All right, so a big one that was mentioned was lack of AoE.
AoE. So this is something that we've talked about a lot internally. We definitely recognize this one, especially in some world versus world situations, some PvE situations. They do a great job at dealing with a single target, shutting it down, doing damage, keeping it confused, moving around, stealthing when they need to, evading, using distortion, these types of things. But then when it comes to a larger setting of dealing with a lot of foes at once, they're a little bit weaker. So that's one of those things that it's a little bit weaker, I think, than what we want it to be. But so we'll be looking at that in the future. But yeah, that's one of those places where it is. We don't want it to be too strong because the Ellie again needs to kind of say, you want ranged AoE damage, you bring me. You don't bring in Mesmer because I, as the Ellie, can't. I don't give you a lot of that utility. I don't give you a lot of that ability to do portal and things like that. I don't bring those tools, so I kind of need to let my role be stronger than the Mesmer's role when it comes to that AoE damage at range.
But again, we talked before about the levels and
It's not black
no
or white.
AoE. It's not all the AoE
It's
in the
not
world.
black.
There's
Yep. So those
to be
sliders can change.
yes.
Yep.
I'm just going to drag that over real quick.
Yeah, that's good.
The other one is mobility. Mesmer does not have a ton of mobility,
Yep. They don't have a ton. Yep.
so a lot of lack of base swiftness. They do have some teleports,
Yep.
but just kind of a slow mover in general. Is this one of their intended?
This I think
weaknesses?
goes back to Portal and how strong Portal is. That is, if you use it correctly in some places, it is the best mobility skill in the game. In other places, it's just not as good as I just want swiftness. Because again, if I've already been there, I can get back. That's what Portal is. If I've not yet been there, I don't really have much mobility. So it's kind of a strength and a weakness that I think we need to balance. So that's one of those things that we need to be careful with because the Thief, I can just go all the way there if I want to, or I can come all the way back really quickly. The Mesmer says I can get there and then instantly come back to here, but I can't go forward again because I don't have the swiftness. So you kind of got to keep those two guys different.
All right, and the last one. I put down thieves specifically, but
Sure.
it's really just more
Burst damage in
burst
general?
damage in general.
Okay.
Not having a lot of, I guess, active defense to block that off. I mean, you have Blur Frenzy, you have
Distortion if you need it.
distortion, but they just felt that a lot of the problems that a Mesmer has right now would be their defenses against very high burst
Sure,
professions. Just because they do have, they have the medium health pool, but they have the light armor.
Yeah, yep. That's one of those things we can't let everybody be good at everything, but we could again those sliders. Maybe we need to look at a few little tweaks that would help them in, for instance, World v World. Sometimes you would just get completely face jacked by a thief that just came out of nowhere, just bam bam and you're down. A couple of backstabs or what have you, and you are out. So we maybe need to look at that one a little bit.
Yeah, I'm quiet because I'm thinking about that as well. This happens to me quite.
Why don't you quickly run through our kind of what we were thinking for those?
Strengths? In terms of strength, we have access to key utility skills, which bolster team support and generally like battle engagements. Gains defense through stealth, evasion, illusions. The misdirection style of play, and it is a very strong one-on-one ranged damage dealer.
Sure, but again,
Things
kind
like
of a little bit
spatial
weaker
surge.
AoE.
Though that is a weakness that it does not have sustained AoE damage. Another strength is their ability to remove boons. Oftentimes it needs to be traded and stuff like that.
Yeah,
but they do have some utility
only
skills.
the Necromancer, I think, can maybe do it better. Mesmers can, if they want to, they can remove boons if they need to. For sure.
Mesmer does have good boon removal.
They can if they want to. Okay.
Yes.
So some of the
and
weaknesses?
weaknesses, condition removal, like you guys have been talking about. Sustainability if illusions are countered, which I think that's kind of what I feel the thief is actually doing here. Is that it's not allowing you to spawn your illusions to get that sort of misdirection going.
Sure.
And they oftentimes track you down through it, and so. Yes, sustainability if illusions are counted. I think that's kind of where that whole if your misdirection
Just
fails.
really reliant on the clones then.
Yeah.
But that's also one of those things too. You look at any encounter, be it PvE, especially PvE and World versus World. If there's a lot of just AOE damage from other forces,
Yeah.
you're going to have a hard time sustaining your illusions, which means you're going to be weaker. So that's one of those things too that I think is one of their weaknesses. For sure. So,
Got it?
Yeah.
yep. So that's pretty much Mesmer in a nutshell.
We might be running a little longer.
We are running a bit longer.
Yeah, we'll move a little bit quicker. So we'll touch on Necromancer really quickly.
Yeah.
Go for it.
Well, we'll give it its.
We'll give it its due, but yeah, let's go for it.
All right. So. This is kind of your baby. Right?
Okay, yeah. So one of the things that you guys said is that they should be the kings of sustained fights, high attrition damage. We definitely agree. That's one of those places where we want them to, as we've said before, kind of jokingly, that they get into a fight. The Guardian is a good example. Lock horns with that Guardian. It's like, all right, I'm going to get stronger as the fight goes. My conditions are going to start to wear you down. My damage is going to start to wear you down.
Make you use those cooldowns.
Use those cooldowns. I'm getting more and more Death Shroud as the fight goes, which means now I have another health pool to sustain me. I also have a lot of damage through that if I need it. So we want them to be really strong in sustained fights. Without being too strong, which is one of the things we need to be careful of.
I would say that the Necromancer fills that role pretty well right now.
Yeah. And at different times, in the game, they've done better or worse depending on the meta. I miss Community. I'm gonna miss that show. One of the things too that they have a weakness with opponents with high mobility. It's not just the high mobility; it's people who can drop conditions and then leave. Because a lot of times they're going to get some chill on you. They'll probably have some cripple on you. Maybe an immobilize is going to hit you or something like that. So if you can drop those and then leave, they're not going to have the swiftness or the mobility to catch back up with you again. And that's again kind of like the Guardian. We want those two guys to kind of they're really strong when they get somewhere, but we don't want them just bouncing around all over the place like the Thief is able to do. Low damage mitigation for low dodges. Yep. So this is also one of the weaknesses that you guys kind of pointed out. This is one of those places where the sustainability is really good for them. But if you get past the Death Shroud, you blow through, maybe they've got Worm. So if they use Worm, they can actually drop, they can break stuns, and they can actually leave a fight if they want to. This is a utility skill. They have a really hard time kind of getting out of fights. And that's, again, we don't want them to be too good at that, or we get back to the old Elementalist problem of then they go heal, come back, and now they got all this Death Shroud. Extra, 15,000 hit points, and they're in your face. That's a really dangerous problem to have. At the same time, maybe the levels, we would never give them a whole bunch of vigor, for instance. We would never give them the ability to just dodge all over the place or be swift all the time in the same way that maybe a Thief would be. But maybe that means that, the Death Shroud levels, those again, the grays you keep talking about, those could come up a little bit.
So, could you mention why Necromancer doesn't have a lot of access to swiftness and boons in general?
Yeah, sure. Let's talk about, so similar answer to earlier when we talked about the Elementalist and the Guardian.
Yes.
Part of it's thematic, that we don't want them to just be, I'm a big, bad, buff Necromancer, and I'm dodging all over the place. Like, that's more the Thief role. That's the Mesmer role. They're tricksy. They're here, and then they're not there.
And similar with Guardian, like Guardian is like, I have all the boons and giving
No conditions.
Yeah, and no conditions.
Yep, and the idea we wanted more for the Necromancer was that they're kind of sapping your strength. They're getting that Death Shroud over time, and so that then when you go to try to kill them, they're like, it doesn't matter. I've sapped so much strength from you that I have so much health. Now you have to leave the fight. Now you want to run.
So the Master of Ripping Boons, or a Master of Ripping Boons,
Sure.
again, because of that, you pay off. You have the trade-off of low boon.
Yeah.
Low
Applicability
boon
for
income.
yourself.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I was looking for a word that I don't know. It didn't come out.
And again, these are all sliders, and this is what the balance is. It's not just numbers, but it's like looking at those tools and saying, okay, at what level do they have too much of this and not enough of that? And just that's what balance is in a nutshell for all three game types of just trying to get all those tabs correct for every single class so that they feel like they can perform roles correctly, but they have some holes too. So that's how everybody gets to get into a party, because they all do different mixed matches of what they can and cannot bring to a fight.
All right, so Ranger. Actually, I guess.
I think
go through ours?
they were pretty close to
I
ours.
think, yeah, sorry, I skipped ahead because I thought
Yeah.
we were
A lot of our
right on par.
Our what we have listed, strengths, sustainability through debilitating your enemy and regenerating things yourself.
Like Death
your
Shroud
Death Shroud,
damage.
Yeah, sure.
mainly. DPS and physical and conditional form. We've been constantly bumping up physical just a little bit at a time.
Sure.
And there have been some trait changes and improvements, and it's kind of it's in our sort of direction where we want to go with a little bit more. Make this guy a little bit better in his physical form, like when he's wielding the daggers or his axes, that kind of thing. And the last strength listing, opponent control through conditions and status effects, mainly fear.
Scrap control. Okay.
Yeah.
And this is kind of similar to the engineer that we talked about earlier. That they just get this web of stuff and knockbacks and blowouts and dazes and crippled, and it's just this web of stuff that kind of keeps you off them. But once you get past that, that's when you start to get on them. That's when they start to struggle. They want to then establish distance again, push you away to re-get control of the fight.
Yep. And weaknesses, mobility.
Yeah.
Very little dodging, lack of vigor is well, I mean.
Yep.
That was the ones that you guys listed, and that's similar to our listing here as well. Disengaging is not something they do so well either, and
Intentionally.
Yeah.
Okay.
And it's similar to the Guardian again.
Sustained AOE damage is something they lack. Is something they have less of an option to do as well.
So, and this kind of gives you guys a sense too of what we're thinking for future balance passes down the road of where are those things that we need to shore up just a little bit. That's kind of what this whole process is kind of what we're thinking when we start to look at balance down the road. That's kind of what we're thinking. The lights just came on.
They did.
So there's a ghost in the room. If you want to talk to us, you can.
Oh wait, we have the ghosties over there.
Yeah, in the form of Mark. All right. So that's pretty much Necromancer, I think.
Yeah.
Keep moving. So we've got 2 left. No, 3 left. I'm sorry.
The thief is hiding.
The thief was stealth. Yeah, sorry. So Ranger. All right.
So the ideal place for Ranger is, and I think I heard this is similar to how Guild Wars 1 was, is that very high spike single target damage.
Yeah. Yeah.
Just
We want to just go through ours first, then.
Sure.
Yeah. If you want to.
Yeah.
Because that's we're thinking the same thing.
Yeah. So Ranger strengths listed. Long range single target damage. They should be probably the best long range single target damage of all the professions. At least they should
definitely
compete for it.
Yeah, sure.
I know the Mesmer. We've listed the Mesmer as.
I would say those two are probably where we want them to be. Those are the 2 contenders for long range damage, probably.
Sustainability through melee evasion and dodging. They get access to a lot of vigor. They have access a lot of their weapon skills actually have evades on them. So the ability to skirmish.
Sure.
And then sustained melee area effect.
Okay. So more AoE on the actual the great swords and the sword.
Sword.
Okay. Axe.
Axe is an AoE
Now,
weapon.
where do you count axe? Since it's kind of like a hybrid weapon.
Axe actually is a hybrid weapon.
Yeah. It's also a mid-range hybrid too.
Yeah. So it's not quite melee. It's not quite long range.
Sure.
But it is counted as an AoE weapon, and it is both physical and conditional weapon damage.
Yep. Okay. Want to do the weaknesses really fast?
Dealing with opponents' boons is one of them. Like they don't have boon rip.
Yep. At all.
They don't have things that can actually help assist against empowered enemies. Stunbreakers is something they currently lack a little bit of. Like if you take a spirit build, there aren't any Stunbreakers on this build.
Yeah.
Right.
You have to go elsewhere in order to find it.
Sure.
Kind of countered with the high evasion that you would see on weapon skill.
Yeah, you want to evade that stun that's incoming.
And the reason for that is if we give you both, if you're a ranger, if we give you all the ability to evade, and then they finally get this one stun, and then you're like, all right, you break it, keep evading again. Like it can get really frustrating for other people to try to I can't compete with that. So that's why we do that.
And also they have the pet mechanic. So they are reliant on their pet for their maximum efficiency. Their pet has a lot of. Though they have a lot of options for pets, and the pets themselves have utility.
When you talk about high single target DPS, do you factor in the pet's DPS into that as well, or are we looking at just weapon damage specifically?
Both.
I'd say both, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
But yeah, so your pet, if you are a ranger, is a strength as well as a weakness because we are factoring that into your damage output because anytime that you're fighting something, that means you also have a pet that's there assisting you putting out damage as well, which is why your numbers might be a little bit smaller than somebody using the exact same weapon set sitting next to you because you've also got a pet that's also putting out damage. So you can't be 100% as strong as they are, plus have the pet, the numbers would kind of blow out a little bit. So we got to be careful with that.
At the same time, we do look at the usefulness of the pet.
Mm-hmm.
And
because maybe they're
where,
snared, maybe they
the
can't
areas
get
of where
Yeah.
the pet suffers the most. And that being said, the pet in high level areas like against champions and elites
Sure.
and those heavy creature encounters, like the pet does have some issues in that area.
And that's one of those things too that we know that in specifically in PvE encounters, sometimes that they can be really rough. So again, looking forward in the balance for the game, that's one of those things that we're thinking about is, okay, how do we make sure that those things are not just a hindrance? How do we make sure that people are happy to see a ranger with a pet, with a strong loadout? We want to make sure that that's something that you do want to see because of what they bring to the fight. So as we look forward, at different balance patches, that's what we're thinking. So.
That's a really good point, because like you mentioned that the pet's DPS, or the ranger's DPS is so reliant on the pet, and
Sure.
in like a high-end dungeon, or
If they're dead all the time, it doesn't
then
matter.
you just have someone in your party who's doing 75% DPS or
Yep.
whatever the number is.
Yep.
That's a good point.
So
We didn't cover community.
yeah, it's right here. It's right here.
I don't know where this is.
Okay, so yeah, some of the weaknesses that you guys had though were, yes, the AoE, especially at range. Like the longbow stands out as all it's got is barrage, which is not super strong. The trade-off there is that we want it to be one of the strongest single target ranged options in the game. Again, looking forward in balance, we'll be looking at how to make sure that that's a very strong tool set for you if you play a ranger. Some of the weaknesses were group utility, which is true. It depends on the build because, for instance, spirits, you can kind of bring a lot of utility. You can bring a lot of, stuff to the party. Maybe not in the same way that the Guardian would, or maybe the Elementalist would, but you do fill a little bit of that role. But again, we can't let you do that and have really strong AoE and really strong ranged, or you kind of have a package that brings everything. So we got to be careful with that.
Although they do have one of the longest water fields in the game.
Yes, healing spring.
Yes.
Very good. Very, very good. Again, you guys had mobility. They don't escape a fight as well as some other classes. They can have okay swiftness. It's not super strong, but it's we want to be careful that if you can imagine, because of their evasion, they're kind of competing with the thief, who's also very strong at evasion. So the thief, because they have a little bit more mobility, a lot of times they're not nearly as tanky in melee. They can't deal with conditions as well. They don't have a lot of the repeatable, sustainable evasion, because the thief is eating through their initiative pool while they're doing that fight, whereas the ranger is able to sustain a little bit better, especially against condition fights. So, but you guys kind of had very similar stuff to what we were thinking too, so that's great.
All right.
Thief?
Teeth?
So I had a question for you guys.
Yeah,
Going
go for
into this is something I found on the forums here.
Okay.
So when we are looking at Thief, how does
Sure.
stealth factor into how we approach weapon skills? Like those question on I would say stealth counterplay. Just how does it factor in overall when you say we should change X weapon skill or this utility?
Yeah,
Do you think about stealth actively when you do that?
Very much so, yeah.
Yes.
You want to talk about Thief? Yeah, you love Thief.
I do love Thief.
Not that we don't love
I
all
love
the
all
classes,
the professions,
but
actually.
yeah.
Thanks for putting that in there. You love everything.
Well, I would say that stealth is not necessarily a profession mechanic, being that there are
Other
weapon
ways to
sets
get it,
and
sure.
places that we say that there's no stealth on this weapon set. There's no access to it. So it's not. We don't factor in stealth the same way we would initiative or your stealing mechanic or your weapon skills necessarily the same.
It's just it's a very unique tool set though. So
but it is something
factors it in.
it is something that the thief is themed with.
Same with the Mesmer, right? So we know that it's a very specific tool set that you can use in very different ways. So yeah, it definitely factors in. You just have to be careful of if I give you too much damage, and then I also give the ability to just go into stealth, and in some PvE content that just means you are completely fine. You heal back up, go right back in again. We got to be careful with that. So we factor it in as you can just drop combat unless there's a lot of AoE. So then we have to factor in, okay, well, if there's a lot of AoE damage in this fight for PvE or for War v World, it's not as strong. One-on-one, it's very strong, right? One-on-one skirmishes. So it's one of those things you have to factor into every single weapon set and every utility, thinking, how can they use stealth? What are stealth strengths? What are stealth weaknesses? So
All right, so for the thief strengths, I feel like this describes the class pretty much in a nutshell.
They did really
so active defense,
Yep.
teleporting out of combat into combat using stealth to avoid damage.
Evasion.
Evasion, thank you.
a lot of burst.
Oh, there we go. A lot of burst, high burst potential.
Very much so.
Using the stealth mechanic, obviously, is a huge. That's kind of just very thematic for the thief. Just in any game, really. Then the high mobility.
Very high mobility. Yep. I would say pretty much the kings of mobility in the game as far as the ability to at any time go into a fight, out of a fight. They can go where they want to. For instance, with a short bow, it's not limited to I have to close on an opponent like I would with a guardian. I can leave a fight as well.
And
It's very versatile.
Instantaneous teleports too. Like you're here and now you're over there. Whereas some classes have high mobility, but they have to travel there, and you kind of see them in the fight. Whereas a thief, you have that moment where you see them teleport, but then you go like, okay, look, they're over there. You follow them. So then the thief's weaknesses was low passive defense, HP and armor, and then the final one was condition removal. So how does the weaknesses specifically align? With
ours are low health, limited condition removal, and the third is phrased oddly, but prolonged sustainability in a fight. They don't hold up so well over long periods of just sitting there brawling.
And that goes with like their high burst damage. So you wouldn't want them to have super high burst damage and a lot of sustain, because then all of a sudden you have a guy who's just always on you, right?
And it gets back. Remember the play that we talked about, like the very start of the show, of you are on an engineer and you see that warrior throw out their berserkers. You know that you have this window you need to wait. With the thief, you know that over time their initiative is doing this. Like, you know what I mean? It's slowly over time. If they're doing damage to you, they're probably spending something to do it. You think about the Necromancer is the opposite. Over time, their dash route is doing this. So that's kind of the idea that they can jump in there, they can burst. They don't want to be there for too long. So if you can just sustain, if you can stay through that fight, keep them there, then at some point they either need to stealth to leave, or they're just going to be out of initiative and they're just vulnerable.
They're going to take a chill and take a fear or a stack of bleeds, and then have to retreat.
So those are the you guys kind of hit that one on the head, I think, of where we kind of want to see the class in the future and where it's at right now. I think you guys are very much in line with what we're thinking for that as well.
Just another note, as with Elementalist and Engineer, this is a very high risk, high reward class. Like, I will say there is a big difference between someone jumping on the class who's never played it before. Maybe someone in the middle like me who's okay at it. I'm all right. But then you have someone at the top end who is just like just amazing, and they could like take most classes in a one-on-one. They just do amazing damage, and they know how to play. Like, this is one of the few classes that like you just have that such a like high ceiling. Like it's just so hard to get there.
The thief. It's just it's almost like if you look at a lot of other games. Anytime that you have like a really glass cannon spec, a lot of times the answer is if I kill it, it can't kill me. So let me kill you first. So they have a few tools to kind of get out of jail if they need to, if they're really in a hard spot. But you have to get really good at using those and knowing when to use them, because you have so much damage as a tool, but you have so little survivability because of it. So you've got to really learn how to use the thief class and the thief toolbox in order to get through a lot of encounters. So.
All right.
And also, I want to throw in there like that. Also, they do have survivability options, but then it involves sacrificing damage a lot of times.
Yes, a lot of trade options.
Yeah, so like for
Opportunity
example, the Shadow Arts line where they do have a little bit of like condition removal, like one every 3 seconds, while they're in stealth, and they have some sustainability where they regenerate their health. But it also, like, in order to attain that sustainability, they have to relinquish the fight. They have to let go of their opponents.
And again, like we said, that's the opportunity cost that we had talked about. That you kind of got to make those decisions on what you want to give up if you want to get something else.
What role are you trying to fill?
Exactly.
And what are your holes in that?
All right.
So, final one we got on the list here today is
Warrior.
Yes.
All right. Go for it.
I want to throw this in that the thief also has the ability to steal boons. That's listed as one of the strengths of the.
And that's very unique, because it's not just the Necromancer's corrupt. It's not just the Mesmers. Let me get rid of them. It is let me actually take them. Let me use them now for myself, which is it's a unique skill set that the thief has. So Warrior, you want to go through our strengths real quick?
Yes.
And then we'll do their strengths.
All right. Strengths: sturdy body.
Sturdy body.
Able to apply physical or condition damage.
Yep. Masters of War. We wanted them to be able to war things very well.
Have that offensive tool set.
Exactly.
Sustained area effect damage.
Yep.
Generally speaking, from melee. And melee crowd control.
Yeah, Warrior can really. They can. I mean, as you guys know, if you're playing a mace or shield, or if you're playing a hammer, you're going to be able to do a lot of crowd control with those melee options. You guys had control. One of your strings, so we just talked about that. Hardy, I like that word. Hardy, personal sustain, which, juxtaposed with the Guardian, is not only can take care of themselves, they take care of the party a little bit better than the Warrior does. More burst and sustained damage. This was one of those I wasn't sure. Is it more the sense that they want to get to more burst, or they want it to be the case that the warriors are more sustained and less burst? Was it where they are now, or where the community wants them to be? Did you get a sense of that?
So I think the idea is that the warrior. That's an interesting question because the warrior's very much in your face, and then he stays in those fights for a long time.
Sure,
so I would
sure.
say that'd be sustained damage.
Okay.
Because you want to be in that fight. It's kind of like the Guardian. You go in, you stay in that fight, and you don't have a lot of disengages. So you
Sure.
kind of stay there until the end, right?
Yep.
So I think instead of being a lot of burst, because again we talked about the thief, if you have a lot of burst and a lot of sustain, you know.
Yeah.
You know why we're in.
And we want those two to be different. That, you know, if you have the two really strong in melee, doing a lot of damage classes, you know, the thief needs to be get in, do my damage, get out,
Right.
recharge initiative. Whereas the warrior, we want more of, I get in there, maybe don't do as much burst, but I have a little bit of CC, let me keep you here, let me keep my damage on you, that type of feeling, that they can kind of sustain that damage over time.
So I think that's really what players are looking
Okay.
for, is like that good sustained damage in the
All
fight,
right.
sustaining themselves, sustain in general.
Sure.
Sustain.
One of the strengths you guys had is the low condition removal. We've kind of, there was a time when, if you look at World versus World,
Yeah.
I think that was a weakness.
I think it was too, because I was about to go into this.
That's
that
a formatting error.
I think that what you were about to say was this. If you look at World versus World, if you look at PvP, there was a time when a lot of times warriors felt like they were too weak to conditions, which is why you started seeing, we did some improvements to stuff like Berserker Sands. You saw Cleansing Ire. You saw Dogged March. Oh, and this is, again, at the beginning of the game, those weren't as much of the issues. But later as the game evolved over time, those became really big issues, and the warriors were starting to see a lot of issues. So this goes back to the one of the original questions that we posed, which was, is it proactive balance or is it reactive? This is a case of proactively, we wanted them to be one way, but then reactively, the players were saying, hey, I want to use my warrior, I want to get in the fight, I want to be there, I just can't deal with all these conditions when I get in there, man, I can't do it. So we said, okay, we'll give you a little bit more loving on those areas. And that's an example of us listening to you guys, listening to your feedback, and letting the game evolve with you. As you guys learn the game, we let the game evolve with you as far as the balance goes.
So on the weakness front,
Sure.
again, we talked about the conditions being a big thing here.
Yep.
Low amount of evades. Not a lot of evades here.
And again, you're a warrior. You're there to block it, to counter block it, to counterplay. You're not there to move around and be agile. You're there to just stand and deliver. Yeah.
So on the same note, then low protection.
Yep.
0.
Yep.
Yeah. Again, because they already have that high sustain.
Sure.
They're already a sturdy body. Like you don't want to add
Yeah.
protection on
It'd
that.
be too much. Yeah.
That's where the high health pool comes into play as well. Mm-hmm. You can mitigate some of that damage is absorbed into your health pool overall.
Sure.
So range professions, warriors very melee based. You know, you want to get into that fight, and so a lot of gap closers on the skills.
Mm-hmm.
But again, if a range class is able to kite you very well, like that's one of your
Yeah.
weaknesses. And that's what they want the weakness to be, is being able to be kited out.
Yep.
And the last one is low mobility. I think this is more of a where we want to head.
I would say that they probably have a little bit too much mobility now. So maybe the players are suggesting.
Yeah, I think that's where the ideal situation
Okay.
is moving towards, less gap closers for these classes, or being able to use them like a thief to escape combat
Sure.
kind of thing. So I think that's the ideal location.
Okay.
So how does that align, Mr. Carl?
Very similar, I think.
Yeah, it's pretty similar. Weaknesses. We actually have we say they don't have as much of a response to enemy boons. Mm-hmm. They have destruction of the empowered. That's not like removing the boons or saying that protection doesn't work anymore or
And
something like that.
That's a trait which does additional damage for each boon on your target.
Yeah.
So just in case you guys don't play that, you know what that is.
They are reliant on adrenaline use.
And this goes back to class mechanics. So kind of with the thief starts full, goes empty. Warriors a lot of times they will need to build up to cool stuff or build up to full damage potential. So
Yeah, whether or not you use the adrenaline, a lot of times there are better benefits from gaining the adrenaline.
yep.
Making accurate decisions on what to use.
Yep.
Yeah, either maybe you need to switch over to longbow and
Yep.
cleanse your conditions with ire, or you have burst precision.
Yep. And also too, you get traits like that, but also there are just places where they just need to build it to full, and then just sit there if that's what they want to do for some of their traits to do max damage.
Heightened focus,
You
that's
still
what
got to
it's
build up to that stuff. There you go. Good job.
Yeah, I'm like, what's that called?
All right. And what's the last one you had there?
And they can be overwhelmed by conditions if their defenses expire.
And this is kind of what Josh's point was earlier about fighting that warrior. He sees the berserkers, he backs off, and then he knows he can overwhelm them if he gets some good play in.
So that's everything. That's all that we've covered, all the professions.
Sure.
And I just want to reiterate the previous point of so a lot of this is our goals with
Sure.
professions, and to say that we mentioned low condition removal is intended on some professions. There is again a There's a level in between. I'm going to just use that same phrase over and over until it's done. So it's not to say that you will never, ever have condition cleanse. Just that there's a certain place in between those 2 points, between having too much and too little, that we need to find. And that's really what we're doing with balance. So these are the high-level goals for each profession, and this is what we're going for, and this is what we weigh each change against. These specific roles and strengths and weaknesses for each profession.
Yeah, and so when you guys are giving feedback, or if you see us talking, or if you're in game with us, or whatever, those are kind of the places we want to push each of the different professions with you guys as a community. Make sure that we have the same ideas on what things should be strong and what things should be weak for each of the classes. So yeah, we just want to have that same roadmap together, if you will.
Yeah.
And on that note, if you guys do leave feedback, I would make sure that you notate it with like a PvE, overworld, PvP kind of. Just kind of let us know where you're looking at balance from. Everything does differ wildly, and we are trying to make sure things stay together, kind of fairly similar. So it is helpful.
There are multiple forum sections that you can leave feedback on. We read all of them.
Yes. Profession balance is probably
profession balance is pretty good.
The most, at least I do, anyways.
Yeah, I've been posting in the a couple of the different profession ones recently as well.
Keep that stuff specific, and bullet points are your friend, because the faster we can read through it, the faster we can skim stuff, get an idea of what you're saying, and then know how to respond. If it's big, long walls of text, sometimes that's just so much that by the time we get done, we got to go to a meeting, we don't get time to respond, that type of stuff. So keep it succinct. Bullet points are your friend.
Yeah, so anyways, that was the balance philosophy, I guess, 101 with
just high level stuff.
Yeah, just high level. And we'll update you guys in the future as we are ready to talk about what specific changes we're going to be doing.
Sure.
As we
Looking forward to that one.
Drive towards.
I'm excited.
Yep, drive towards
these end game goals.
Yep.
So that's pretty much it on the balance side. I did have a short little thing about Eternal Legends 2. It actually probably already is live because we went a little bit we went longer than we were supposed to today.
Oh well.
So the Eternal Legends 2 signups are probably live as of right now. So I think there's a llama behind us right now. That you guys could win that.
It's over there. It's one of those.
Somewhere back there in that area.
It was over there.
Okay. So you guys could actually win that sweet thing.
Woo.
Oh, the blog post is not live. It will be live shortly with the link to signups. Again, we're opening it up this time to 128 teams. The previous time was only 64. The llama mini is going to be account bound and not tradable. But this is not the only event that you could win it in.
It's true.
All you need to do is win one round of the event, and you could have that sweet mini. And again, for the teams that place really, really well, we have legendary weapons, precursors.
Can I sign up?
No.
I want that llama.
You'd have to win too, Carl.
Win.
Never mind.
So anyways, guys, there should be more information coming out on the GuildWars2.com website here shortly. Really excited to see the turnout. Again, last time we had so many people want to sign up that we couldn't handle everyone. We just had so many signups.
Volume was so big.
Yeah, so
awesome.
we've bumped it up to 128. There are qualifier weekends this time around. We'll have the full schedule and times for the events. Will be live on that blog.
Read it. And show up. Yeah, sign up early. It was amazing. The turnout was amazing for the last one. So get in there.
Yeah, and we have 128 slots this time. If you are not super keen on PvP, this is the perfect time to try it out. Those early games won't be streamed, so there's no reason to be shy, and you could win because there's gonna be a lot of other teams in there that will be experimenting, playing for the first time as well. So
yes.
All right, guys. Well, I think that's it for today. I'm gonna go eat some lunch, and
we're gonna get some lunch. Yeah,
sounds good.
All right, guys. We'll see you next time.
Thanks, guys.
See ya. Follow the channel.